evening and welcome to another, hang on, what's going on there? Welcome to another exciting show. And tonight we have a special guest. We've got Jerry Marzinsky, if I pronounce your surname correctly. And we've got Jenny in chat. And we've also got Robert the Rascal. And I do apologise because Robert and Jerry were having a great conversation and I had to rudely cut in and say, we're going live. So please accept my apology, Jerry and Robert. Yeah, no problem. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Now,
hello.
Thanks for joining us. We're talking tonight about entities, and I've done a short write-up about this. And we have quite a few people, by the way, from America actually come on into our chat room. And I think you were saying, Robert, there's a chappie that is also a pilot, isn't there, that comes in?
Yes, a fellow pilot. Jerry will probably tell you this himself. If John Basilone should be in shortly. He's a Californian that's had to been forced to leave California and living now, as if memory serves me correctly, in Alabama. And he is, like Jerry, he's an aviator. He flew in the US Marine Corps and I believe in the US Air Force and was based for a time out of Mildenhall, I believe. But he'll probably correct me on that. But it'll be an interesting backwards and forwards for you to actually talk about instrumentation drills or whatever you flyers talk about. Because I know that Jerry flew in the Arizona Air Guard or National Guard, or unless I miss my guess.
The Civil Air Patrol.
Right. Okay. How does that differ? Pardon my ignorance.
Oh yeah, they're very different. The Air Guard is more. They're more attached to the military than we were. We're like we're an Air Force auxiliary volunteer group.
Right.
So you basically didn't have to do what they wanted you to do. You didn't have to accept the mission. Okay. So,
okay.
And there was one time where we didn't because they wanted us to check on, fly into these little airports and take everybody's number, the plane numbers. We're not going to be a spy for the government. A lot of us just refused to fly. We're not going to do it. They got pissed off, but what can they do? You're a volunteer. They can't fire you.
Good grief. So did you do things like SARs, search and rescues and things like that as well? Yeah. Right. Okay. That's very interesting.
That was the basic, that was a basic job, search and rescue.
Right. Very interesting indeed. Pardon me monopolizing it. Sorry about that. I just find it fascinating.
I'm just wondering what the chappie in the US Air Force had done wrong to get posted to Mildenhall in the United Kingdom. I mean, it must have been a bit of a shock for him because I think that's the US Air Force Eastern Front, isn't it? No, it's a nice place. I'm only joking. Right, shall we have a quick looking chat and then we'll get straight on with the show. We've got Yorkshire Rose, who's actually in Canada, and she says, my message has been deleted and all I said was, I'm looking forward to this. YT, YouTube doesn't like me. Well, I don't think they like you.
It's more likely that they don't like me.
No, they don't like me either. Bob Hollyoak, evening. There's Paul Green says, hi, Chris. I will have to catch the show later in the week. Got something on tonight. I need some lines from your parents. You have to do lines and a note from your parents, I'm afraid, on that one. I'm joking. Catherine says, hello, Eric. Hi to Jerry. So the people have really been, So hello all, and that's again, and then we got hi again from Sean Hamer, no relation to John Hamer. Hello everyone from Louise Wilcox. Then we got some geezer we've never heard of, Robert Daw, never heard of him. Don't know who he is.
I don't know who that imposter is. I have no idea who he is.
No, it's probably a troll. We've got Hey Blondie, the truth seeker. Who's blonde?
I'm more grey than blonde.
Yes, and we've got loads of other people. We've got Foxing Band. got was it? It's not real. The idea of a hang on, here it comes. It's not real. The idea of a demon is a few thousand years old. Humans are over 1 million years old. Are we? Oh well. Interesting. Now we got evening from Ralph. We've got Aunt Sally. Hello, Aunt Sally. And we've got Chris the gardener in as well. Evening all. Looking forward to this. And yes, he's in darkest Norfolk, isn't he? So you know. And who else we got? Oh, we've got a lot in here tonight. We've got evening Jenny as Jenny. This is Pandora Chaser 2. Was not given intro from outset, despite being the sole female in the room. I just said hello.
Somebody's in trouble.
Oh, smack wrist. Sorry.
Thanks, lovely.
Hello,
we
Jenny.
were saving the best to last.
Yeah,
it's National Ignorance Day, so I decided to ignore you for charity. You know, so believe anything. I'm watching live at home tonight. Usually, I'm listening whilst out and about. So there we are. And we've got Town Crier. Hello. Right. So on with the show. And if I get rid of that. Now, Jerry, I'm fascinated in what you have discovered, your research. If you could just have a quick run over. I mean, I believe you work for the American Prison Service. Is that correct? At one time,
I worked in a number of places. I worked at probably the biggest psychiatric hospital on the planet for 7 years, Central State Hospital in Milledgeville, Georgia. I worked for a number of county hospitals. I worked in mental health centers. I worked in private psych hospitals. I worked in the psych department of the Arizona State Prison for 17 or 18 years. And the last 10 years I spent working psych crisis in major hospitals all over the city. So I've been all over. I've done virtually every psych job that they have over here, and I'm now in private practice.
Good for you. Also, something I was going to mention. I mean, our ancestors knew a lot about demonic things, and I call science a bit of a religion. Yes, science, it looks at the evidence, yes, but it's sometimes turned into a religion. And we've turned our back on a lot of the knowledge that people had then, thinking it's old wives' tales and superstition. But there were some highly intelligent people that were aware of something weird that we cannot see. And if you go around tribes around the world, especially in Papua New Guinea, the Amazon, they all talk about the, shall we say, the unseen demons or whatever. And they're all very frightened of these entities, shall we say. And it's very strange. You go to Africa, India, everywhere. Now, that is very odd. How comes they know so much about it?
Well, you look at our own Bible. I mean, 23 times Jesus has cast these demons out of people in the Bible. And yet, you know, modern society is going like, well, that's a fairy tale. You know, everything else in the Bible is true, but that's a fairy tale. Well, they don't pay any attention to that. You don't have the preachers teaching about it either. They go, oh, we don't want to get into the negative part of anything. So they don't, you know, most of them don't do exorcisms. The Catholic Church does a limited number, but, you know, they completely avoid the dark side. And the dark side is it's the enemy. And then you talk about science, you think, you know, psychiatrists or scientists, they've done no research into these voices that the schizophrenics hear at all. They just basically went, we're psychiatrists. We hereby pronounce that those voices are hallucinations. They've not done one study on it whatsoever, none, you know, and they have no grounds for that. These things aren't hallucinations. If you start looking at them, they run very fixed, very repeatable patterns. And if they're running patterns, they can't be hallucinations. There's something holding them to those patterns.
The thing is, if we go right back to Descartes in the 16th, 17th century, you're looking at, well, the 17th century actually, but you're looking at this kind of like messy idea of spirit and messy idea of things we can't see. It just gets in the way of science because we can't measure it, we can't see it. So let's just chuck it out. It's, you know, the church has no jurisdiction, no more presence in the scientific world. We have to completely dissect, what we think we know about the world, because this nasty, dirty spirit thing just gets in the way. So let's cut it out. So that's where it came from.
That's exactly what they did.
Yeah. But this is going back 200-300 years. This isn't new. This isn't just at the advent of psychiatry. This goes right back, to the mid 1700s, I believe, when, or might be in the 1600s, when Descartes was around.
Yeah, and then the early psychiatrists or psychologists, just the same thing. We can't measure it. We can't see it. There's no way to prove it. So we're just getting out of it. But we're spiritual beings. I mean, your spirit leaves you. You're just a clump of matter. We're energetic beings, and what these people are doing with their drugs, it's these voices are energetic entities also. So we're talking about your memory's energetic, your spirit's energetic. It's your spirit that hears, sees, feels, and thinks. It's not your body. It's not your brain. Your brain's more like a radio receiver. You tune it to a certain channel, and schizophrenics are tuned to a very low frequency. But it's the energy. So since these voices are energetic, they can go into your mind, and they can pull up every rotten memory that you've ever had. That's what they do with schizophrenics. They go in there, they pull up every rotten thing they've ever done, and they rub it in their face until they turn their emotional state negative. It's only then where they can steal their energy. So we're not at the top of the pecking order on this planet. We're all being attacked by these negative entities. And it's not just the schizophrenics who do it. I mean, almost everybody's experienced. You're walking along the sidewalk, and all of a sudden you have this horrendous, nasty, negative thought to do something that you wouldn't never do, but it's telling you to do. Like you stand on the edge of a high bridge, and something comes into your head. I wonder what it was like to jump. Or I remember a preacher telling me he was standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon when he got a voice told him to jump. Stuff like that. Those aren't your thoughts. People think that all thoughts that appear in your mind belong to you, but your mind is energetic. These entities are energetic. And what psychiatry is trying to do is to treat an energetic problem with a physical drug. So, you can't do that. And like Jenny was saying, the psychiatry and psychology have knocked out this energetic stuff a long time ago, because you can't measure the spirit. You can't measure a thought. Nobody's pulled a thought out of a person's head or out of their brain. It's not measurable.
It's that age-old, age-old. It's been airbrushed out of common history now. But the rivalry between vitalism and materialism, and vitalism totally understood. We're going back 200 years again. Vitalism totally understood that life was alive. It was living. There was essence to it. You couldn't kill it and then dissect it and find the essence. It's like taking your TV apart and looking for the right. Pictures. And that vitalism understood that life was a whole, and it was only when materialism won the war in that battle and said, no, it's all materialistic. That's where we are. And I believe, depending on how far down the rabbit hole you are, I believe that is deliberate, to cut us off from the very natures that we are, the very spirit that we are, that is manifest in our body. I believe that's all deliberate, that, to separate us from our power, our inherent connection to the earth and the ground that we walk on. I believe that is a deliberate ploy.
Well, it's not doing anybody any good, especially with psychiatry. I mean, this is schizophrenia, and mental illness is an energetic disorder. It's like energy is pure. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it. So you look at a magnetic field, you wouldn't even know it existed unless you got iron filings and maybe put them in a jar, and you put it on top of that magnetic field, and then you would be able to see the outline of that magnetic field. Okay. Well, what psychiatry is dealing with schizophrenia is the same thing. These are energetic beings. Okay. You can't see them themselves. all you hear is that schizophrenics. Well, the voices are telling me this, and the psychiatrists are saying, well, you're psychotic. You're crazy as a bedbug. We don't hear them, so you don't hear them. If you're hearing them, there's something wrong with you. But that's not true. They run patterns. So the patterns that they run are their physical manifestations, and I've been studying those patterns for decades. And one of the first ones I saw was their negativity. They're consistently consistently negative, persistently. They're always negative. They're always saying rotten stuff. So the first thing I wondered was, what holds them on such a negative trajectory? Why don't they just random like all other hallucinations? And I've working in the ERs, I've dealt with a lot of hallucinations, and none of them were just consistently negative. They were all over the place. Some were positive, negative. They were just everything. They were random. These things aren't random. They're consistently negative. So my first question was, what holds them on such a negative trajectory? Why aren't they random? The second one that I ran into, both of these were when I was working at the big psychiatric hospital. They're anti-religious. So I noticed that the schizophrenics that I was working with on the ward, when the chaplain was giving an ice cream social down in the big hallway they had, the schizophrenics wouldn't go. They'd lay on the dingy ward and lay in their beds and stare at the ceiling, or they just wouldn't show up. And I saw that was a persistent pattern. I'm like, well, I'd start asking them. I got curious. Why aren't you down with the rest of the people? It's hard to get ice cream and cake in a psychiatric hospital like that. And they go, well, we don't like preachers. We don't believe in Jesus. We don't believe in God. I prayed to him before. He's not there. He did turn my back. They wanted nothing to do with religion. And then I remember one day, one of the schizophrenics came in and said, I repeated the 23rd Psalm, and the voices acted like I had just thrown worms on a hot frying pan. And I went, well, that's interesting. So when somebody told me something like that, I would ask the rest of the schizophrenics that were on my ward. Same thing. There was no shortage of schizophrenics at that hospital. So I'd start asking them all, what happens if you do this? If you say the 23rd Psalm, how do the voices react? The voices went nuts. All of them said it was the same thing. They hated it. They reacted very voltally to it. They didn't like it. They didn't like the Bible. They didn't like preachers. They didn't like any prayer. They didn't like the patients praying. So it's like, second question was, why would a hallucination be anti-religious? And it just went on and on and on. There were like 23 of these things. And what these are equivalent to the iron filings in a jar that you put over a magnet. Okay. These patterns are the iron filings. These are how these voices manifest themselves in physical reality. And they run these patterns consistently. And I'll go over them real quick. I'm not going to go into detail on each one. They foster negative emotion. So what they tell these people is consistently negative. It's nothing good. They want to bring them down to a low level. And then they're able to withdraw their energy. So they are energetic parasites. So they energetically drain their victims. And you talk to schizophrenics, they ask them, well, how do you feel before the voices come, and how do you feel after the voices come? And they will tell you, after the voices attack, they're completely drained. So I was experimenting with this at the hospital, and what I do is I did just a rough little subjective test. I gave them a 1 to 10 scale, like how much energy do you have before the voices come, and how much energy do you have after they come? Okay, and then we ran that through some statistical procedures, and it was statistically significant. They had statistically less energy after the voices attacked them than they did before, according to their reports. Right? So they get louder if they're ignored. You know, these are all patterns, and people listening, you can check this out for yourself. If you're working with schizophrenics or you have one in your house, you can see these patterns for yourself. And, you know, like Jenny said, I suspect that what psychiatry and big pharma did is first they blamed mothers for schizophrenia. Okay. And then, but you could see the mothers would go, hey, wait a second, we didn't do anything. What's the deal? Why are we getting blamed for this? Mothers could see this. So they moved it up into an area that couldn't be checked out by the general population. They started blaming it on genetics. So from then on, you needed a genetics lab and highly trained people to investigate this. And many of them weren't interested in investigating the genes of schizophrenics. So they got away with this for more than a decade. Oh yeah, it's the genes. It's a gene. They had no proof. They just made it up and threw it out there. They needed something to make it look like they knew what they were doing and that they knew the cause, but they never have had a cure. And the more honest geneticists jumped in there and went, hey, we've researched this. There is no genetic abnormality. It doesn't exist. You know, so they needed something else. And then they needed it somewhere where people couldn't investigate it on their own. So they kicked it up to the biochemical imbalance crap. You know, that was Eli Lilly.
Oh, dear.
Back in the 70s. You know, so when they came out with Prozac, they went, well, you know, our Prozac is a chemical and it seems to help these patients. So all mental illness must be a biochemical imbalance. They got away with that for maybe another decade. You know?
Easily. More, Jerry, more decades.
Yeah, I'm sure more. And here they are pushing drugs the whole time. But the whole system was taken over in 1910 by the, it wasn't the Rothschilds, it was the, who were the other ones?
Rockefellers.
The Rockefellers and their foundation. They made it into law. I'm sure they bought off the U.S. Congress and made it a law that the only medicine that can be taught in the U.S. universities were pharmaceutical medicines. So that had to revolve around pharmacology. You know? So if you weren't teaching pharmacological medicine, you couldn't graduate medical students. You know, they turned that into law. So they knocked out all the other kinds of different aspects of psychiatric or psychological treatment that were on the coming in. They knocked out Tesla's violet ray. They knocked out naturopaths. You know, they knocked out the guys with the pins, the acupuncture thing, knocked it all out, and they took over the medical system in 1910, and then they took over the universities after that. So the universities are only teaching pharmacological medicine also, and a part of that is that the voices are hallucinations. You know, nothing to do with spirit. So here's all these high falutin psychiatrists coming out there with their degrees, believing that these voices are hallucinations, just like I did when I got onto the front lines. You know, but what I saw was, you know, were patients actually carrying on full-fledged conversations with somebody or something that I couldn't see, and it wasn't word salad. So I was thinking, well, that's what they taught us in college was, well, they're hallucinations. So you would think, well, they're word cabbage, they're word salad. They're not going to make any sense, like hallucinations don't make any sense. But when I heard them talking, they were carrying on full-fledged conversations with something or somebody I couldn't see. And it was like listening to somebody who on one side of a telephone conversation, you know?
It's interesting you talk about the training though, Jerry, because when I was 18, which is 40 years ago, I'm afraid to say, I did a psychology A level. So it was our, you know, I don't know what you call it in the US, but anyway, it was our A level, sort of age 18. And in that A level, it was all empirical stuff. It was all about measuring original, you know, reaction times and psychology. It was what I considered to be genuine psychology. But 30 years later, my daughter does an A level in psychology. She doesn't complete it because all they talk about is how drugs alter brain chemistry and how it repairs the damage of your brain chemistry. And this is at the youngest level.
It's total bull.
I know it's complete and utter fantasy. But that is what they're teaching our 18-year-olds, 16, 17, 18-year-olds in England at A-level. And I was so mad with it. I mean, I didn't know that was what was on the curriculum until my daughter tried to do the A-level. She was completely, unimpressed with it because it's not what she wanted to do. But
it's pharmaceutical propaganda, Jenny and Jerry. That's basically what it is.
It actually is. These people got so much money, they don't know what to do with it. So they bought off the universities, they bought off the Congress, they bought off the brainwashing of the psychiatrists, and they haven't done any research on the voices at all. None whatsoever. When I got down to the hospital there, I was asking, what are the voices telling these people? They didn't know. They weren't even curious. They felt like they already knew because they were told they were hallucinations. All right. So I started asking the patients, what are these things telling you? And it took a while because what happens if they talk about their voices too much, the psychiatrist comes along and just drugs them silly. They don't want them talking about them. And your hallucinations are out of control. We'll give you more milligrams of drugs. Twice when psychiatry found out I was asking these patients what these voices were telling them, I got pulled up into their offices and they told me, you will not ask them those questions. The voices are hallucinations, and what you're doing by asking them questions about them is you're reinforcing these hallucinations and making them worse. It was too late. I already got too much information to buy that one, but they tried to stop me. And I had to be very careful at the state hospital because, the unwritten rule there is you don't do anything to upset patients because you don't know what they're going to do.
If I may just add there, sorry, Jerry, when I was doing my training as a hypnotherapist, we were told not to treat people with schizophrenia because you don't know what you're letting loose on somebody. But I know that really what you're doing when you treat somebody with when you're treating somebody with schizophrenia with hypnotherapy, what you're actually doing is getting into the psyche, you're getting into the place where those entities hang out. And you can actually talk to them. And I know you have experience with this, Jerry.
Yes.
You can actually talk to them and you can ask them to move to a different place. You can
ask them to move into the light. Once they move into the light, they're gone.
Yeah.
A lot of them are earthbound entities that died here and never moved on. They're afraid that there was one where we asked him, well, why haven't you moved on? And he said, well, my wife and my mistress are over on the other side and I don't want them. I don't want to be around them. They know what I've done. I don't want to go there. Stuff like that, or people that have done things that were so bad, they don't want to go and have to face, and
it's really curious as well. I mean, I've treated people not necessarily with classical voices, but with haunting fears and anxieties about this, that, and the other. And when we've gone into the hypno state and we've got them to identify what these entities look like, you've had dragons and lizards and demons holding on with claws in the back.
Yeah.
And,
on the shoulders,
on the back. And, that, I've actually been saying, well, what would it take for you to release these claws, and then they come and they really, they adopt a whole voice, a whole persona when you're talking to these people about what's going on for them psychologically, and it's not until you go in and you look at these parts, we call it parts therapy. It's not until you go in and look at these parts that are ruling their lives that you start to see they are entities. They're attachments.
They are entities. Now, there's another section that this new therapy I'm working with, it's called MACE. It's an energetic therapy where trauma creates these programs in the mind that stay there and your energy flows through them. They're like a computer virus. They can be quickly removed with this new therapy. Stuff that affects these people all their lives. And what I've heard from one person was that these negative entities hang around those triggers because they're like triggers. Everybody's got somebody that kind of person they don't like. It's a program that was put into your brain by some experience you had in the past. When those things are triggered, those entities feed.
Absolutely.
So one fellow said they hang around those triggers, and when they go off, they just add fuel to the fire. So yeah, they are
very true. That's very
they
true.
they have their own personalities. Some of them are dumb, some of them are very smart and sly, but boy, they don't like anybody messing with their food.
No, absolutely.
What I was going to say though, Jerry, is that it's like radio waves. They're all around us. And if you went back, say, a couple of 100 years, and you try to prove that in the future we'll have radio waves, the people would think you're bonkers, because the radio tunes in, or television tunes in to the signals that are in the ether, shall we say, that are around us. But one area two areas I'm rather interested in is when people become ill, they tend to be, that is physically ill, they tend to be taken over, sometimes by an entity. And I've noticed this a lot with cancer patients. They're taken over by a kind of evil entity. And I've noticed this with a close relative of mine who passed away some years ago, that this turned from a very nice person to something absolutely horrendous.
Yeah.
And the other area I'm interested in is these psychopaths. There are politicians, for example, like, I'll give you an example, Tony Blair. Now, Tony Blair, there was a book written by a good friend of his who said that he was completely different. He's a really nice guy years ago, and suddenly he changed, and he's no longer a friend of him. Something sort of got into him. But, looking at those sort of three areas, like, for instance, illness and psychopaths, I'll be interested to hear your views on that. And also, off air, I can tell you about our health service, but I won't do it on air because I'm in front of a YouTube ban, obviously. So,
believe me, I've heard about it.
You've heard of it.
I've heard about it. I've worked with people from England who tell me about it.
Yeah.
It's horrendous.
It is.
It's not so much a health service as a stealth service.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Well, it's actually designed to stress you out, I think. And it is almost as if it's designed by demons to make you ill in many ways. But back to this sort of thing with illness, do these entities, for want of a better word, I guess they jump in when people are physically ill? Do they sort of queue up?
Well, they can do it in a number of different ways that I've heard of. Ouija boards. They're not toys. Do not touch those things. Warning, fair warning. I've had a number of clients who went nuts on Ouija boards.
They used to sell them in toy shops in this country, seriously, until the 1960s.
No, they're very dangerous. Amphetamine. I've seen more prisoners go psychotic on amphetamine than any other drug. It just opens them up and goes, come on in. They first start hearing voices and they go, oh yeah, they're just hallucinations, and they go away after they come down, and then one day they don't. So they might go away for months, and then one day they're there and they're just as psychotic as any of the patients in the psych ward. Sexual, physical, and emotional, severe sexual, physical, emotional abuse. Virtually all schizophrenics have had some form of that, So when they talk about a chemical imbalance, it doesn't exist. They're just they're making billions of dollars on these drugs.
There was a bunch of guys in the States a few years ago. Robert Whitaker, do you know him, Jerry?
Uh-huh.
He was a journalist. I think he was ex-psychiatry, or he was certainly a medical journalist. And he pulled together a publication or a channel or something called Mad in America. I think it was a book he wrote. And he went into all the research and found that there was absolutely no evidence anywhere in any of the papers on any form of chemical imbalance. It was pure hypothesis that had never been confirmed or denied.
Oh, it's been denied now. They have solid evidence that was just a fabrication.
But if you go to a GP and you, a general practitioner here in the UK, and you ask, what's wrong with my brain? I've got depression. They will tell you still, you have a chemical imbalance, take this drug. So even though it's been denied, it's still not in the popular psyche. We still are treating the body as though it's some kind of machine that just needs to be corrected with the right chemicals. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's the biggest propaganda kind of marketing job that's ever been perpetuated, or on the human population.
Exactly. And look at how much they're making on it. The global antipsychotic sales have soared to 14.54 billion in 2021. $14 billion in just antipsychotic drugs alone that cure nothing and actually rot out the brain with long enough use. What they did is, some of these patients that we had in the state hospital, they would take them, they'd do autopsies on them, and they found that their brains were shrunk like walnuts from these drugs. And of course, when they published that, when they finally were able to publish that, because the drug companies don't want that kind of stuff out, the big pharma and the psychiatric mafia went, no, it's not our drugs. It's the schizophrenia doing this. So they started, the laboratory people started feeding these antipsychotic drugs to rats and monkeys and mice, and found that their brains were rotted out also. It rots out your brain and your peripheral nervous system. So these people are doing more damage than they're doing good. The only thing those drugs do is they sedate the patients, so they don't cause as much trouble. They drug them down, they dope them up. So that was a major finding when the phenothiazines first came out. They were discovered by accident in a dye lab in France, where they dye fabrics. And then they took the active ingredient from that. They wouldn't let them test it in Europe, because Freud's thing was going on then. So they brought it over to the United States to a psych hospital in the US. And they found they could drug the entire population, reduce their staff, save a lot of money, and have a lot less grief from these people. All they got to do is drug them silly, so they just drag around in a zombie-like state.
That's what they do in old people's homes in this country. They just drug the people out. They're in Gaga land.
Yeah, and it doesn't cure anything. They're still hearing the voices on top of those drugs. Those drugs cure absolutely nothing.
Also, there was a case of a chap that had a near-death experience, and he said that he sort of drifted up off the operating table where he was in hospital and went over a pub and noticed these awful, whatever you call them, queuing up, waiting for people to get drunk. And he went back into his body again. I don't know if you've heard of that at all.
I've heard of that over and over again. They don't call alcohol spirits for nothing. It didn't get its name just randomly. No, I've heard over and over again that it's not just the alcoholic who's drinking. It's all these other entities where you get the building up to the drink stuff where, oh yeah, you can go by the bar. You can just say hi to your friends there. You don't have to drink, or you can have just one. The leading up to a drink. What they say is that those drug addicted entities and alcoholics never leave the auric field. They're always there, putting suggestions into the person's mind. Oh yeah, you can drink, you can use, And I've heard a number of accounts where they actually, once a person hits a certain degree of inebriation, they just jump in there and they take over. They take over the drinking. So it's not just the alcoholic who's drinking; it's all these other spirits who can't get drunk in a spiritual state that have to jump into somebody's body to get high again.
I've actually seen an experience. I mean, there was somebody that married into my family who was very moody and was a little bit like Richard Burton. Now, Richard Burton could drink vast quantities of alcohol, but was never seen drunk because his body thrived on it. And this person that married into my family was like that, very, very strange, and as if there was a demon controlling him, because he seemed to thrive on creating stress and tension and do the most odd things. For example, he went to a museum, a military museum, and whilst people are not looking, was undoing the brakes of the military vehicles so they could roll over people or something like that, doing all kinds of very odd things. And you think, it's a bit strange. It's as if, like a teenager, a naughty teenager. I think I'll do this, and very odd, and never twice alike. One time would make a conversation with you, another time wouldn't say hardly a word, and again could drink incredible amounts of alcohol. You could never smell alcohol on this person's breath, and was sober as a judge, as they say, absolutely sober. And I just wonder. I know that this person's father was a Freemason, and he seemed to be okay. And I just wondered whether it was something to do with the secret rituals or whatever. I don't know, because I'm not a Freemason. I've never had anything to do with it. Whether it's something that conjures up something like that, I just don't know. I mean, I just wonder what your view on this is. Whether you've come across these what I call boozers. They're not alcoholics; they're boozers.
Well, working in the ER, I mean, they would come in with alcohol levels that would kill me. I mean, I'd be stone dead if I had that much alcohol in my blood system as some of these people did. And their tolerance just keeps going up and up until they hit reverse tolerance, where they can't take it anymore. So even if they drink a little bit, they throw up. They can't drink anymore. A lot of them go into DTs, delirium tremens, which is it's an alcohol psychosis that 1 out of 10, if they're not treated, will die from. And one of the quickest treatments is to drink more alcohol. Yeah. So, yeah, I've seen them. I've seen too many, driving around with alcohol levels that would kill me. I mean, they drove themselves to the ER.
Can I jump in a little bit with there's a question in the chat from Aunt Sally. Hello, Aunt Sally, about what the side effects of these schizophrenic drugs are. And that, she says, I think, which is perhaps why many schizophrenics stop taking them. It's true. When I was 23, I was diagnosed schizophrenic and put in a psych ward. And the side effects of those drugs are horrendous. They are complete physical paralysis. You shuffle. You don't walk anymore. You shuffle. Your brain is a mess. It's a complete fog. You can't concentrate on anything. You've got no attention to anything. And what there was another one, and you might know the name of it better than me, Jerry.
Akinesia, where you start shaking. You got dry mouth. Your vision's blurred.
Yeah, all of that is just horrendous. You're absolutely physically. It's like you are literally in a chemical straitjacket. And you cannot move out of it. It's like everything just slows down and stops. And I kept wanting to stop taking my tabs, obviously, because it was just horrendous. I couldn't think, I couldn't walk, I couldn't speak, I couldn't do anything. I was like a zombie. And that was my experience of it, Jerry. You've probably got many more examples.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. Blurred vision, dry mouth, sexual dysfunction, akinesia. There's this. You're sedated, but you're nervous at the same time. It's a horrible feeling. They hate them. These newer antipsychotics they have less side effects like that, but they still do the same things. And they don't cure anything. They don't have a cure for any mental illness. That DSM, that Bible that they use, completely fabricated. There is not a single test. There's not any EKG, EEG, any X-ray. There is no physiological test that exists that will verify even one of those, 297, I think it's up to now, psychiatric diagnoses that these guys have fabricated. So what they've done is they've taken up a whole string of normal behavior and they've broken it up into different segments. And it's a complete scam, so.
You're on the same page as us, Jerry. I mean, I 100% agree with you. And I was wondering, would it be okay? We could go into chat now
sure.
And have a quick look at chat. Is that okay with everybody? Anybody want to mention anything to Jerry at all?
It's good for me.
Speaker. No, you're muted.
Sorry,
That's it.
sorry. There's a question I want. There's loads of questions I wanted to ask, but one maybe I could address to both Jenny and Jerry. Now, given the power of schizophrenia and the voices that are generated by it, what are the chances of evil entities, the New World Order, whoever you want to call them, weaponizing those, finding a way to weaponizing them?
Well, they've already done it. They've got voice
Right.
to head technology.
Voice to skull.
So we're at voice to skull technology where they can broadcast a voice into people's heads. It's all. They were talking about it on Redacted on YouTube. So you go to Redacted. Right. Now in the U.S., all this flying saucer stuff and all this hidden technology is now starting to come out. And the Congress, for the first time, is not saying, hey, this is bullcrap. They're saying, we want to hear it. So they're protecting these whistleblowers. And one of them came on last night and said, yes, they do have that voice-to-mind technology, and they can broadcast thoughts into your mind.
Think about the power of that, Jerry, in the last 4 years.
It's scary. It's scary.
Think about it. Think about the kind of what was it? Matthias de Smet talked about the mass psychosis that we've all been through, the mass programming that's come out in the last 3 or 4 years.
And look at the politicians. Look at they're friggin' nuts. They're nuts what they're doing. They're totally insane. Matter of fact,
Jerry,
spot on there. Yeah, bonkers. Sorry, Robert.
Jerry. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry. Does that have, and this is for Jenny as well, does that have a relation to binaural beats and binaural frequencies? Those hypnotize, it doesn't, right? Okay, great.
No, they're not connected at all.
Right.
No, those will calm you down. Those are more like meditation stuff. This is a totally different thing.
The binaural beats go in alternate ears, and it's designed to stimulate each side of the brain. So that when you're thinking extreme thoughts of something or another, you're then sort of stimulated to think about it in a different part of the brain. So the binaural beats just stimulate both part of the brains while you're doing whatever practice you're doing, meditation or thinking or whatever. And it just causes you to put those thoughts into different areas of the brain so that you're not coming out with the same old railroad every time, the same old neural pathway. So the binaural beats therapeutic.
Jenny, does that have anything to do with chanting? Because you're a Buddhist, aren't you?
I'm a Buddhist.
Are they triggered? Does that trigger binaural frequencies or a binaural beat to actually help settle you down or channel you or move you to some place that you need to be?
Well,
we are moving into the world of frequency and vibration, which we know with Tesla's research and beyond, going right back into 1600s, 1700s. You're looking at vibrational frequency was a whole study in itself. So, chanting and using the voice and the vibrational frequency of the voice box is hugely therapeutic to the body. It hugely grounds you. It connects you back to the earth. It connects you into the frequency of this earth rather than that mad stuff that's going off.
Well, I'll tell you this. The voices do not like Gregorian chants.
No.
They hate the 23rd Psalm. They can't stand it. I've had patients tell me that repeating the 23rd Psalm, the voices react like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. So why would a hallucination do that? There's so many aspects of a scam to psychology and psychiatry right now. They did a study of papers that psychologists published. This big research organization, they found that 80% of them were not replicable. So they were basically garbage, and that's what I hated about psychology. Like Jenny was saying, when you going through school, you couldn't verify anything. Here they're feeding you all this information, and there was no way except to verify it in a rat lab, maybe, and I remember the first time I ran into that was, we were assigned a paper to read by a clinical psychologist who wrote that if two patients who were psychotic had the same delusion, so if they both thought they were Tony Blair, one of them would have to change to somebody else, George Washington or something. And even as an undergraduate, and I'm going, well, why? Well, they're both nuts. Why would one of them have to change? You know? So fast forward 8 years, I was on the second floor of one of the psychiatric units, and I was creeping up behind this guy who was talking to his voices. I wanted to hear what was going on, and all I could tell was there was like a one-way, it was like a telephone. You know, you could hear one part of the conversation and not the rest. So he was a new patient. I hadn't seen him before. And all of a sudden he turns around and he catches me. And I introduced myself. I said, I'm Jerry. I'm the psych for this unit. I haven't seen you before. I said, what's your name? And he said, I'm Jesus Christ. And I thought back and I went, no, you're not Jesus Christ, because I am. And I'm sitting there waiting for him to see what he's going to do. Is he going to change his delusion because I said I was Jesus Christ? And he looks up and he starts thinking about it. And then he looks back at me and goes, okay, we can both be Jesus Christ. And he walks off. You know, complete bull. This publish or perish is what these you know, in the PhD program, that was it. Publish or perish. They didn't care what you published as long as you published it. Now the DSM, this Bible of theirs that they teach in all the colleges, all the universities. It's the Bible for psychologists and psychiatrists. Here's what one of the psychiatrists said about it, Julian Whitaker. He said, every single one of these mental illnesses were fabricated by breaking up segments of human behavior and pathologizing them. There are no blood tests, there are no lab tests, there are no x-rays, there's no EEGs to validate a single one of these diagnoses. They are classes of behaviors that a group of psychiatrists have voted to be a mental disorder.
Absolutely.
And what I heard the inside of there's 10 of them that get together. 2/3 of them are associated with big pharma. You know, so I heard it was like a tobacco auction where they come in and they go, hey, I got a new mental illness, and they read it off and everybody thinks about it. And the pharmaceutical ones go, well, maybe can we fabricate a drug that we could sell for this thing? And then they vote them in or out. You know, another one said the DSM-5 labels almost all human emotion as mental illness. A child who talks back, a man who spends too much time on the internet, a woman who grieves the death of her husband or child for more than 2 weeks, are all labeled as mentally ill and told they need to be drugged. Unhappiness is labeled as depression, and people are encouraged to numb themselves with drugs instead of dealing with life situations that are causing their unhappiness. Over 2/3 of the psychiatrists who wrote the DSM-5 have financial ties to the drug industry. Now, here's some of the diagnoses that they put in there. You know, I think they voted out Southern Bell syndrome, but they got mathematics disorder. They've got caffeine intoxication disorder. Drinking too much coffee. Sibling relational disorder. These are just kids fight with each other. Now it's a disorder. You know, sexual orientation disturbance. So homosexuality. Now here's some of their better ones here. Florence syndrome, being overwhelmed by beauty, such as Florence, Italy. Symptoms include fainting and dizziness. The treatment is antidepressant drugs. Paris syndrome, mostly experienced by Japanese patients visiting France. Symptoms include depression, anxiety, feelings of persecution, which before the DSM would be labeled cultural shock. This is the kind of crap that they put in there. And the insurance companies, you've got to put down one of their diagnoses to get paid. You know, so it's like, yeah, everything is centered around this fabricated book of disturbances that they've completely created. And it's very impressive looking.
Yeah. But what's your view, Jerry? I mean, sorry, that hit my funny bone, that did. So what's this Florence syndrome? So that's just,
it's bizarre.
I know, but something that I'm interested in, it's what Bruce Lipton has looked into. I don't know if you've heard of Bruce Lipton or Dr. Bruce Lipton, and that is epigenetics, where things can be carried on from people that's had traumatic situations, say in wartime. Now, I know in my own way, what happened with me, I mean, my father suffered all his life from severe shell shock and it was never treated. And when I was very young, I was told this, that someone walked into the house and clapped their hands, I'd dart under the table and be terrified. I'd scream, ah, ah, ah. I didn't know what I was frightened of.
I've got an answer for this, Chris, if you don't mind me interrupting.
Certainly.
So the epigenetic nature of memory is passed down generation for generation. Even in mice studies, they've freaked mice out about something, and then generations later, the mice are still behaving in a certain way. And you find that there's so-called in Eastern mythology and Eastern mystical traditions, you've got this thing about 7 generations. So memories are passed down 7 generations. They come down from the past and they go into the future. So 7 generations past and 7 generations into the future. And you'll find, what was the name of the guy? I can't remember. It'll come to me in a minute. Bill, somebody or other. He went down to Zulu, Africa, and he came across this tribal way in which people interacted with their ancestors. And he set up a therapeutic, Hellinger, his name was Hellinger. He set up this therapeutic structure that he brought back to the West called family constellation. And that process looks at how generational memory is passed down, and it affects generation after generation after generation until the person who is suffering with the genetic or generational memory decides consciously to give those responses and memories back to the generation that they belong to. They belong to another generation. They do not belong to ours. And there's something very mystical and energetically, do you know what I mean, mystical about the way generational memory is passed down the line, generation after generation after generation. So the Biology Belief, which is Bruce Lipton's book, he talks about this. He talks not only about the memories, he talks about the physical, literally, like there's another woman called, she's dead now, she wrote a book called The Molecules of Emotion, Candice Pert, and she talks about how she could no longer identify what was emotional and what was physical because they're absolutely inherently linked. So I don't know if that kind of resonates with you. The generational memory is just being passed down. What's your thoughts, Jerry, on that?
Well, yeah, what I've seemed to have seen is that schizophrenic parents will create in their children the mental and emotional low frequency for these entities to move over to them. So I don't think it's a genetic thing. It's the way they're treated. You know, they're treated by these schizophrenics in horrendous ways a lot of time because the voices hate kids. You know, I had one patient, he found that the voices were tormented by the sound of babies laughing. So he would go to, what is it that they have these short clips on there. It's not YouTube. It's, I forgot what it was. The Chinese company put it out.
TikTok.
TikTok. He'd go to TikTok and he'd get pictures of babies laughing, and he would torment the voices with the videos of the babies laughing. They hate kids. So that, you know, that explains a lot of what's going on right now with all this trafficking stuff, you know.
I think the thing about generational memory is that precisely that it isn't genetic, it's epigenetic. It comes from outside, and it affects the familial energy that goes through the line. There was a question in the chat there about how I manage my condition now. I mean, I haven't had a condition as such for nearly 40 years because, I came out of it and I stopped taking the drugs. And I honestly believe if I were to have continued taking those drugs, I would still be taking them today and I would still have a psychiatric condition, because this is another myth of psychiatry. That once you've got schizophrenia, that's it, you've got it forever.
Right.
Complete and utter lie. But it's a lie, outright lie, because the thing is, people can recover and they can absolutely go on to live perfectly normal lives.
I've seen it over and over again.
Over and over again. But the fear is, if I stop taking these drugs, they're telling me I'm gonna keep going back and I'm gonna keep regressing, so I better keep taking them. And it's just an absolute lie, out and out lie.
Those drugs should only be used for schizophrenics who can't control themselves. Other than, and I've seen it over and over, and they don't tell the patient how dangerous these drugs are. These are some of the most dangerous drugs used in medicine today. And I've never seen a psychiatrist sit down and explain all the nasty effects, all the damage that these things can do. I mean, they don't tell the people. They go, oh, you'll get blurred vision, your mouth will be dry, it'll be okay, you'll get used to them. I mean, it's an absolute lie. I mean, these things are very dangerous drugs. And there's a number of things that schizophrenics can do. Is these voices are liars. They lie about everything. I mean, there are valid treatments to help people get through these things. I mean, one is to realize that they're not you. I mean, they sound like the voice in your head. There's no change. There's no difference from the other thousands of voices that you hear in your head every day. It's the content. They're constantly telling you rotten stuff about who you are and whoever everybody else's are. I mean, but they sound just like your own voice. So we're taught from the time we're kids that any thought that comes into your mind belongs to you. That's far from true. Your mind is like it's like the electricity in a radio. I mean, if you open up your brain, you're not going to find any thought in there. Nobody's ever extracted a thought out of anybody's brain. They're energetic entities, just like we are. So what psychiatry is doing with pouring drugs into the physical entity is the same thing as trying to, pour Thorazine onto a magnetic field and expecting it to dissipate. It's got nothing to do with that. They're drugging the body, but they're not getting at the energetic disturbances that caused the schizophrenia in the first place. They're not even in the ballpark. They're not even close, and they're getting further and further away, and they're drugging people at a horrendous rate now. That I mean, they've got in the United States there's over 622,000 kids under the age of 5 on psychiatric drugs. Yeah, so they're moving into the drugging kids now with these powerful drugs. Over 80,000 are on ADHD drugs. This is amphetamine. This is, I had prisoners in the prison who started out on these ADHD drugs, and then they moved up to amphetamine, and now they're psychotic and they're locked up useless in prison. There's over 38,000 kids in the U.S. on antidepressant drugs. There's over 85,000 on antipsychotic drugs. These are the same drugs you were talking about that just blew you out, turned you into a zombie. 85,000 kids. And it's more now because these were statistics from years ago. There's almost 400,000 on anti-anxiety drugs. And they're making a fortune on these things. The antidepressant market in the U.S. is expected to reach $15.98 billion by 2023. These people got more money than they know what to do with. They can buy off Congress. They can buy off the universities. They can buy off the publications.
I remember when I was a newly qualified teacher. I've been doing it a couple of years, but I got a job in a special needs school in Wirral, on the Wirral in England, and I was working with boys. It was a boys' school. There was a very small school, about 50 kids in the school between 11 and 16 years of age, and they all had different kind of issues. Like some were hyperactive, some were depressed. There was all kinds of stuff going on. They'd all come from traumatic backgrounds, but there was one lad there. He was quite a live little spark. He was quite a lively soul. And one day he walked into the school completely comatose. He was just completely zombie-like. And I said to one of my fellow teachers, "What's happened to him?" And she said to me, "Well, he's been diagnosed with ADHD and he's now on Ritalin." And like, this lad was just, he was just a shadow of his former self. He wasn't a bad lad. He wasn't badly behaved. He was a little bit hyper. He'd had a difficult background. We all knew what the backgrounds of the kids were because they came into us. But he had a terrible, terrible, countenance after he started taking this Ritalin. He was just a zombie. oh God, I couldn't work there. I couldn't stay there because I just could not, endorse that kind of treatment of these young kids, just because they were lively, their issues weren't being addressed, they were given a label and they were drugged up to their eyeballs. And,
Yep.
I think with the Ritalin, you've got a lack of appetite, you've got a change in brain chemistry, you've got all kinds of future issues that come out from having used Ritalin when young. And it's just absolutely criminal what goes on there.
Well,
these
yeah.
drugs cure nothing. They cure absolutely nothing. And there's more of them on the planet now than ever before. And the mental health system is in shambles. I mean, it's just a drug-fueled merry-go-round that goes round and round and round. I've seen it in the private hospitals. I've seen it in the mental health centers. They come in. They go through the same stuff you did, Jenny, with the drugs. They see how horrible they are. They go off the drugs. They get psychotic again. They go back in, and each time the hospital's, fleecing either the insurance companies or whoever's paying, like tens of thousands of dollars for each time they're admitted, and it just goes round and round and round. Nobody's getting cured.
No.
Nobody's getting better. The prisons are full to the max. They've closed down in the U.S. They've closed down virtually all the state hospitals. So these people are out on the streets. The crime rate has soared because they can't hold a job, so they have to steal and rob people to stay alive. And you take a look at
over here, but it's also not only in the mental health area. I mean, for example, last year I had sky high blood pressure. And I spent a night in hospital, and it's the first time I've ever been there, and it was the most disgusting experience ever. And all they did is just sort of gave me a prescription for loads and loads of drugs. Well, I decided, no, I'm not going to go that direction. And I went to an acupuncturist, and a person, he's actually Waltham Abbey, and he happens to be a good friend of mine, and he cured me naturally. I don't take anything like that now, and he got my blood pressure down. He found out what the problem was. He looked into my lifestyle, and he found out what the problem was. Well, I had high blood pressure, and that was it. Brilliant guy, and he comes on this show occasionally. I'm talking about Miles of Abbey Health Food, plug. But the thing, shall we have a quick zoom in chat now, because loads of people.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
They're absolutely queuing it. They're chomping at the bit. So I'm going to start at the end and work backwards, okay? I hope you don't mind, because there's so many. Interesting one here from Urban Fox. The 23rd Psalm is good to protect against negative energy, psychic attack, etc., though more powerful is the 91st Psalm, which has always been used by Kabbalists and magicians, Kabbalists or whatever, and magicians for this specific purpose.
Kabbalists,
sorry, yes.
Yeah, the 91st Psalm is another powerful one. The voices hate both of those. They can't stand them. It's like burning them with a hot rod or something like that. It's like sticking them with a hot rod. They can't deal with it. So what I started doing
Jerry,
when I first
is it only religious text?
No.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry.
The Muslims have their own prayers against these things that are just as effective.
Right. Okay. Right.
They're called, was it the jinn, aren't they?
The jinn. They call them the jinn, and they're more aware of them than we are as Christians. Yeah. They're much more aware of these negative entities than we are. We just kind of sweep them aside. No, we can't see them, we can't feel them, we can't hear them. And the people who can are hallucinating. They're crazy. So look what they've done. Those voices, if they're running patterns, they can't be hallucinations. And they haven't done a single study on those hallucinations, not one. It's just they declare that they're hallucinations because they said so.
Jerry, is there a way, a more organic way, to treat or maybe even eradicate schizophrenia? Obviously, you've got the talk therapy, which is softer and a lot less intrusive and destructive than the pharmacological approach. But is there a way of actually do organic way.
Yeah, there's a number of
Vitamins,
ways.
minerals, that sort of things.
Well, not so much that, because again, you're dealing with energetic beings, and now you're
Right.
talking about physical type
Right.
stuff.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there's a number of different energetic therapies. I'm doing them. Jenny's doing them, and you can actually talk to these things and talk them out of the person. Now, I've done that with some of the lower ones, and there's a number of things the person themselves can do to fight these things. Since they're consummate liars, the Sherry Sweeney came up with, she was like Jenny, who she heard these voices when she was a young lady, and she got rid of them by just calling them, that's a lie, that's a lie. Everything they said, that's a lie, that's a lie. There's a whole battery of things that you can do to fight back against them. And now there's a group of what they call them spiritual releasers who specialize in this, but they're expensive. They're $300 to $400, and they will actually release these things. But if you don't get your energetic vibration up, if you don't get on the spiritual path and stay there, they will come back.
They will. They will definitely come back. I mean, going back to the idea of food, don't forget our food is poison. All of that processed stuff is poison. It is designed to keep us in a sick state. So if you do clean your diet up and get not even organic, really, the best thing to do is grow your own food, which is where I met you last week, Chris. But grow your own food, get as organic and as near natural as possible, get off of all that toxin, all that shit, and that will naturally raise your vibration. It will naturally purify your body. It makes it more difficult for these entities to inhabit your body if your body isn't full of rubbish, basically.
Same thing with exercise. They don't want you to exercise. They don't want you to be doing any kind of spiritual practice at all. So I've got this whole list of things that they don't want you to do. And I tell the patient, well, you do the opposite of what they're telling you to do. What they'll do is they'll throw a big tantrum to try to stop the person when they start fighting back against them. They'll get louder, they'll get more boisterous, they'll get more threatening. But if they can get through that, then they slowly start losing ground So what you're doing is actually starving them to death. They're seeking to they're parasites. So they feed off of us, but they have to get us into a lower energetic state before they can do that. They have to get you depressed and anxious and fearful. So, fear is one of their biggest deals. So that's why they're always saying negative stuff. We're going to kill you. You're no good. You're rotten. You're ugly. You're stupid. All this awful stuff.
We hooked up, Jerry, didn't we? The first time you and I spoke was 2018, and we were talking generally about the voices. And then I think it would have been 2020, we hooked up again, and we started talking about the propaganda that was coming out about, COVID and all the
the Divock.
The Divock and all of that stuff. And like you identified, we identified that all of these so-called messages that we were getting from the Demondium spawn, these dementors, were exactly what they were putting out in the media. So like you had a complete and utter parallel between what they were telling the people and what you'd identified.
Well, all these patterns that the schizophrenics run. I just went through a few of them. There's like almost 25 now, but it's the exact same stuff that's coming through the media right now. The isolation, the fear, the panic, all that same stuff. We
could go into this more deeper on my naughty channel, which is not on YouTube.
Not on, okay.
Because the klaxons are just going off at YouTube HQ at the moment.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. But, no, but that's just why we use code words like Divock and things like that. Divock 91. It's backslang and things like that. But I was going to say, do you do consultation around the world via Zoom and things like that?
I do that every day. I'm doing that.
Right.
And working also with the MACE energy method, this brand new energetic. I've never seen a psychotherapy work quicker and more effective than MACE does. And it was invented by a ship captain, who was brilliant. I mean, he's in the league with Freud. He had nothing to do with psychiatry. He had nothing to do with psychology. He was after, how does the mind really work? You know, and it works. So he's figured it out, and he found that the mind does not do what psychiatry and psychology says it does. He said the mind only takes pictures of where you focus your attention. That's all it does. It's a stimulus response mechanism. The spirit does the thinking and the rationalizing and the reasoning and all the other stuff that is attributed to the mind. But he's found that the mind, as he calls it, can also take pictures of ideas, of feelings, of concepts, and that energy moves from negative to positive. So if you formulate a negative picture of a trauma, and the spirit with the right commands will absorb it, and that negative energy will be gone, and that person will feel like, oh, okay, I remember that trauma, but it doesn't bother me anymore. And it happens like within an hour. It's gone, and it's gone permanently. It cures people, unlike this garbage that they're feeding people with these pharmaceutical crap that they're feeding people.
Well, this is Jerry's. I've got the website below here, and also you can find it in the description below this video. And also, you've actually written a book, and here it is. Yeah, The Amazing Journey into the Psychic Mind. I believe that is that available on Amazon.
It's available on Amazon. It's in German. It's in Spanish. It's in French right now. You can also get it from lulu.com, the publisher. It'll probably they'll send it right to you. That tells you how this began, how we got to the idea that these things are entities and they're not hallucinations like the psychiatric mafia is trying to tell everybody to sell their drugs.
Spot on. Anyway, if we can actually go back into chat, because as I say, there's so many people here. Now we got here. What's this one hit we got here? We can help make it free with many and solve the problem without payment. Yes, but shows we have to live each day. You know, we can't lick dirt off the road or anything like that to survive.
No, well, I think Ancient Ruby was referring to something that occurred earlier on in the chat, where she treats people and helps people free of charge, is what she was saying.
Oh, I understand. I'm terribly sorry.
One of the most important things they need to realize is, number one, those negative thoughts are not theirs. They don't belong to them. And until you realize that, you're not going anywhere. You know, they are not your thoughts. Those negative thoughts, those voices that schizophrenics hear. And most of those thoughts are lies. So if you say that's a lie, they can't get you. It deflects it. But if you try to ignore it, what you resist persists. Okay, so they're going to get stronger and they're going to stay there. We already mentioned the 23rd Psalm. We mentioned Psalm 91. And there's a number of other things that people can do free of charge to fight back. But they have to be willing to fight back against these things. You know, they are not who they are. They'll take you over. Yes. They'll keep at you until they take you over. That's what they do.
Now, Aunt Sally said, I believe that depression can also be caused by a diet lacking in proper vitamins and minerals. And actually, Aunt Sally goes to see Miles, Dr. Miles Fleetwood as well. And yes, and he's natural health and that type of thing. Brilliant man. And
that fits very much to what Jenny said, actually.
Yeah. There's
There's
obviously cleaning up your diet. There's purifying your water. There's energizing your water by vortexing it and doing all kinds of crystal work on your water. But there's also getting your feet on the ground, because
grounding.
You really do need to ground and get the ions up.
There it is. She says it helps stand with no shoes. That's exactly what I do.
Yeah.
On the ground to receive energy from nature.
Absolutely.
So, that is spot on. I'm very much into that. And also, I actually wear what is called barefoot shoes now. Very important. So when you're walking around generally, say in the high street, I actually wear barefoot shoes. And they're very good, I can assure you.
That's interesting. Sorry, Chris. One of the many jobs I did years and years ago was I worked in light and sound, mostly at the NEC in Birmingham. And you'll be surprised how many performers walk on stage barefoot, especially singers.
Sandy Shaw.
Hard, but I just thought, no, but I mean, not just Sandy Shaw. I mean, that was partly a gimmick for her. Maybe it wasn't, but she was a child in the 60s and yada, yada. But I'm talking about people like Sinead O'Connor. Half her band, even a drummer, had no shoes on, no socks, and would literally play like that. But it's interesting. It goes back to what you were saying, Jenny, about grounding yourself, and Jerry as well, about grounding yourself and taking the vibrations from the earth and letting it pass through you. It's interesting. I just thought sorry, Chris, just interjected.
That's okay. I'm just going through the chat room. Sorry, do you want to say something, Jenny?
There was just something else, is like sun gazing as well. That doesn't mean staring at the bright sun, but very early morning sun is very, very good for the mitochondria. It resets all your mitochondria, gets your body working, keeps your weight down, keeps, and it connects you to the earth. Barefoot sun gazing first thing in the morning. It's another way. It's almost like you're calibrating the human body with the energy of the planet, the natural energy of this earth. Do you know what I mean? That, we're given this body to live in this realm with a spirit in this body. So we have to take care of the body. The body is your temple. You have to really nurture your body.
Yes, that's a very good point. I agree. We've got here, it's ironic, this is Urban Fox, that psyche means soul, when psychiatry and traditional psychology doesn't even recognize soul or spirit, but has done everything to convince people they're just meat bodies. Very true.
That's exactly right. That's what we were talking about earlier. They won't move into that area at all because they can't measure it. They can't feel it. The thing is, they're not going to be treating. They're not going to find any cure for any of these mental illnesses unless they do move into that area. And they're, I didn't find anything that was very useful in 4 years of undergraduate psychology, 2 years master's degree, and it was even worse than the PhD program. I found nothing useful. When I got onto the front lines, it was like, there's nothing here I can use except maybe behavior modification, and there were some counseling techniques. That was it. But for 8 years of higher education, it was meager. It was very meager. And I kept thinking, well, they're whole, when I was undergraduate, I finished undergraduate. It's like, well, maybe they're keeping the truth in the master's program and they're only telling those guys. So I got up into there. No, there wasn't any answers there. Got up into then I went, well, they must have it in the PhD program. They must have the answers there. Went up there, and they were worse than any of the others. I mean, it was you talk about piled higher and deeper. I mean, it was horrendous. I mean, it was horrendous. I after 2 years, I got so sick, I had to get out of there. I couldn't take it anymore.
I can understand it. And a feather in your cap, Jerry. I mean, I've been banned 5 times from YouTube. I think you've got a 6 months ban, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they told me
you're saying something right. So now it says here, there? We got Hatchy. Anyone aware of Kitty Pilchard? I just hope I live long enough to see the news. Never heard of her. Kitty Pilchard? Anybody? No, never heard of her. Jerry, this is Kath Holdsworth. Jerry, can entities enter a bipolar patient while on an extreme high?
Well, they love bipolar patients because they generate so much energy when they get on that extreme high. So it makes it very difficult to treat them. They call it a dual diagnosis where they're psychotic and bipolar at the same time. They love those people. Now I don't know when they enter. I've never talked to anybody about it, but they're very difficult to treat because they got 2 things going on, and when they get very low, they get suicidal. And of course the voices tell them, yeah, go ahead and kill yourself. What I never could figure out, schizophrenics have a suicide rate 3 to 5 times higher than the general population. And the voices are always telling them, yeah, go ahead and kill yourself. But what's interesting is psychiatrists also have a suicide rate equivalent to that of schizophrenics. So, schizophrenics are unstable. What does that say about the psychiatric, the psychiatrists?
Absolutely.
Their suicide rate is equal to that of their most seriously disturbed mental patients that they treat, schizophrenics.
That actually, I'll be straight, that doesn't surprise me, because psychiatrists generally, a lot of them, I believe, need a psychiatrist. There's a problem with they actually need one.
The Journal of Clinical Psychiatry in 1980 did a 5-year study of 18,730 consecutive suicide deaths by suicide, and found that psychiatrists suicide regularly, year by year, at rates more than twice expected, and these differences were statistically significant.
Who is it that said that anybody that goes to see a psychiatrist needs their head tested? I can't remember. It wasn't Oscar Wilde, was it? Somebody like that said
so these are the people who are running the Western mental health system. They have a sham DSM. They have a sham Bible. They're not curing anybody of anything. These drugs don't work. They're making a horrendous amount of money. I don't know what they charge for medicines over there, but here, to stay sober or sane, if you got a bad case of schizophrenia, it's $800 to $1,000 a month. Now, you can drive across the border into Mexico and you can get these same exact meds for $75 for a month's supply, made by the same companies as made here. So they go, well, we can, the U.S. is much richer than the Mexico, and they're still making a profit at $75 an hour or $75 for a month's supply. Over there, they wouldn't be doing it.
Well, let's put it this way: they're milking it over here. But I'll speak more about that when we're off air, because I think I've got to be a bit careful. And we got here. Aunt Sally said, I knew 2 schizophrenics in my place of work in the 1980s. Both of them were walking zombies that were kept in a job because they were disabled. One of them, in his 50s, never washed and smelled bad. Ugh.
Yeah, personal hygiene is not on their top list of stuff to do. Like Jenny said, they walk around, they're like zombies. They can't function, and these drugs are rotting out their brain at the same time, and then they have all these bad side effects. I mean, they're doing more damage by keeping these people on those drugs long term than they are helping.
Now we got here, this is another one from Ancient Ruby. Has Jerry ever noticed that many that are possessed, so to speak, are and have been very insecure because some allow that possession because it is stronger, which comforts the person possessed?
Well, I'll tell you that what comes to mind with that. I've seen what in the prison. Okay, the gangs would actually take away schizophrenics medicine, and when they got paranoid, they would tell them, hey, that guy over in this other gang, he's making threats about you. He's going to hurt you. You better go hurt him first. So they would use the psychotics as torpedoes to make attacks on other gangs. And these people would get supernaturally strong. I mean, in a psychotic state, when they're in a furor, there was this one guy in the Florence prison. The guards wanted to move him to another cell. So they came to his cell. They said, cuff up, we're moving you. He goes, I'm not going anywhere, And they said, cuff up or we're going to get the pepper spray on you. So they had these quart cans of pepper spray. I don't know if you guys ever been around that stuff. It's awful. I mean, you get a little bit in your eye and it'll bring you down. I mean, it just totally immobilizes you. They said, cuff up or, we're going to spray you. He said, go ahead and spray me, you bunch of fairies. He started calling them names and insulting them. So he's sitting on his bed. They got out these quart cans of pepper spray. He had a towel. He wrapped it around his head. And they just drenched him. I mean, they drenched him so bad they were suffering from the pepper spray outside the cell. And they told him, now come out now. And he goes, come in and get me, you bunch of fairies. And he started calling them all kinds of names. So they went, well, you don't come out of there. We're going to go get the stun guns. So now there's 3 tiers of prisoners watching the show down there. The guards couldn't back off. You know, they had to win this. So they had to keep escalating it to the next level. So they went and got these 50,000 volt stun guns that shot a little like an arrow with a wire that came out of it, like that followed it. And they hit the guy with it, and he's standing there, and they're 50,000 volts. And I've watched them knock down the biggest prisoner. They just boom out, down on the ground, just instantly. This guy just stood there and quivered. You know, he's like this, quivering. Didn't knock him down. So they hit him a bunch of times with it. It still wouldn't bring him down. So they went and got a second one. They had two of them. One was charging while the other one was discharging. And they did that, I think it was 17 times before the warden got there and said, hey, they're going to get me for cruel and unusual punishment. You need to stop it. You know, and they're telling him, are you going to come out of that cell? And he's going, you bunch of fairies, come in and get me. You know, nobody's going to come in at that point. So they said, you don't come out of there. We're going to get the attack dog. And the prisoners were terrified of the attack dogs. I mean, because they would rip you to pieces. I mean, they were like trained wolves. They were vicious. They were absolutely vicious. So he said, go get your dog. And he said, get your dog. I'm not coming out. So they went and they got the dog, the attack dog. They had him on a big, long rope leash. And they said, come on out, and or we're going to set the dogs on you. And again, he's like, you bunch of, you know, fairies, they could come in and get me, you know, send in your dog. So they did. They opened the cell. They sent in the dog. He put his arm up in front of his face like this, and the dog clamped in on his arm and just bit right down to the bone. I mean, he was just gushing blood. And he pulls the dog to his face like this, and he goes, sit. And the dog sat, but it didn't let go of his wrist. You know, and then he starts petting this dog that has the death grip on his wrist, and he's gushing blood. He's going, nice puppy, nice puppy. You know, and all the guys outside the cell are going, what the blazes is going on in there? So they pulled the dog out. The dog didn't let go of his arm. They pulled him out into the day room, and then they beat the crap out of him. Then they moved him. So instead of turning off the water and turning off his electricity and not feeding him, they went through all that crap. But these psychotics, when they get angry, they become supernaturally strong. I mean, this was superhuman behavior. No human being that I've ever seen could do what that guy did. You know, those stun guns, one shot and you're down. 17, that's incredible. You know, to bring an attack dog, one of those vicious attack dogs that try to rip you apart to tell it to sit, and it sits down. Go figure.
That's amazing. But sometimes, though, they've found that in deep shock or deep anger, it's been known for grandmothers to lift a car. A child got trapped under a car, and a grandmother lift the car up, and they dragged the child clear. Yeah, and she just found this energy from somewhere.
Yeah, and they get it. And I asked one of them, and it was a devil worshiper once. You know, now he had this strange affect. It was like that movie with the puppet. I forgot what they called it, but he had this strange affect. But he wasn't depressed like all the other schizophrenics. And I found out he was a devil worshiper, and I started asking him. I said, well, "Where do you get your energy?" And he said, "They send it to me." And I said, "Who sends it to you?" "Well, they send it to me. The whoever feeds the voices." And I said, "What do you do with it?" He says, I use it to do jobs that they give me. You know, and I didn't ask him what those were. I didn't want to know. This guy freaked me out. But yeah, he was getting energy from them for jobs, to do jobs. And he said he could visit certain cells in another prison, like 75 miles away. He could go and he could visit those cells and speak to those prisoners in those cells. He weirded me out. I didn't want to ask him too many questions.
That is creepy. There's another one.
Creepy.
I was joking. I'm in a rut. I won't mention his name because but can play the guitar. Oh well, good for you.
Play the guitar. They don't want you doing anything that makes you feel good.
That's right. Urban Fox said, as a child in my youth, I regularly saw various entities and heard things. Less so in adulthood. Ghosts, psychic attack, possession are just some of the true causes. Not all of this is malevolent.
No, not all of it is. It's just the malevolent ones get to come to our attention. You know,
Yes.
there's friendly ghosts. Dolly Parton had some living in her mansion. You know, she just kind of, ignored them, and they lived together.
Well, there was one that I heard of, and it's quite a famous one. It's in a place called Sandy in Bedfordshire in England. And if you've ever been to Sandy, I don't know if you've ever been to England, Jerry, at all.
I've been there a couple of times, yeah.
And there's a place in Bedfordshire. It's famous for Brussels sprouts. I think that's about the only thing it's famous for. And Sandy in Bedfordshire, it was strangely enough, a BBC sound engineer. His daughter, they lived in an old Victorian house, and he had a young child that was in a cot, and they heard the child singing and laughing, and in the morning the child started singing Victorian songs that he would never have known. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, where do you get this from? She said, it's the lady with the big eyes that sits in the corner.
Yeah.
And they found toys around the room, and they got someone in who's into spirits and things. The woman said, she's perfectly safe. Leave it. There's nothing. She said, it's obviously a Victorian spirit that loves children. Your daughter is perfectly safe. There's no harm will come to her. And this child learned all these old Victorian songs, and it's quite uncanny. You know, it's quite amazing.
Now we're surrounded by spirits all the time. They're not all malevolent. You know, it's the
I agree with you.
It's the malevolent ones that are causing the trouble.
I 100% agree with you there. I think that you're right. Well, I know you're right on that one. All of them, rather. This is why we do things when drunk that we wouldn't dream of doing when sober. We was talking about spirits.
That's true, because you're taken over by one of the alcoholic spirits. You know, they do things that you wouldn't do when you were sober. They say things that you wouldn't say when you were sober. It's not you who's doing it at that point.
That's right.
It's another spirit who's taking you over.
I'm 100% agree with all what you say here, because I think that, there's lots of things I could say, shall we say, that I can't say because we're on YouTube. Shall we put it that way? But we might do a naughty show if you're interested, Jerry.
Sure.
I've got a naughty channel on BitChute, which I know it's going to go over to Odyssey, but we can say things that we can't say on here, shall we say? Right.
It's funny, Jerry, you should be talking about spirits. And I think Jenny's mentioned it earlier on. My sort of heritage, I suppose, is Caribbean. And in certain parts of the Caribbean, they brew their own rum. Your moonshine, you'd call it in America, or poutine in Ireland. And they call it monkey rum. And it makes you behave like a monkey. It's just quite funny. It really does. It really is. My dad used to actually drink it with wine chasers. That's how strong this stuff was.
Wow.
It was like brake fluid. It was incredible.
Yeah, it sounds like our southern moonshine.
Yeah, same thing. That's probably why I've got no hair, That's probably why my hair's missing,
It's like in Ireland that they did this illegal drink, I think, from potatoes. I don't think it was gin, it was something. And the government legalized it, and they stopped producing it because people didn't want it, because they liked it when it was illegal. But when it became legal, they didn't have it so much. Now, we got here, what we got. Monty, this is. Can you explain why in my experience, I know a father and son have schizophrenia if it's not genetic?
Well, I don't believe it is genetic, and they haven't found the genetic link for it. So it's pretty, at this point, it's pretty clear that there is no genetic link for schizophrenia. But it's how the schizophrenic parents treat the sons or daughters, that they create the conditions for these entities to move into them also.
Well, it's a bit like my mother was bitten by a dog when she was very young. She had a mark on her nose where this dog bit her. So she put a fear, I'm not blaming her, of dogs into me. So when I was young, I was fearful of dogs because she put that fear into me. And I'd never been attacked by a dog at all. You know, it took me a long time to get over it. Now we got here, Kat Holsworth said, often all mental illness stems from severe sleep deprivation. Now that is an interesting one.
Well, I don't think it's
I would personally
I mean, you will go
disagree
nuts
with
without
that.
sleep.
I would say,
Yeah. Well, if you don't sleep, you will start hallucinating.
yeah.
I mean, you have
Well,
to
I was
sleep.
I was a chronic insomniac leading up to my. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think it causes mental illness. I mean, the voices don't want you to sleep because they want you.
I was
they
a
want
chronic
you weakened.
insomniac leading up to my schizophrenia, but maybe like you, Jerry, I don't know. But I've treated loads and loads of people with anxiety and depression and all kinds of mental health issues. And I wouldn't say sleep deprivation causes all of that. I would say sleep deprivation causes a dysfunction in the brain, inability to log in with yourself, to clock in with who you are, inability to really identify what's going on in your own body because your brain is so frazzled you can't work it out. It's a perfect condition for the entities to lock in because you've got no clear thought anymore because you can't focus on anything. So that's my opinion when it comes to schizophrenia and sleep, but not other mental health conditions. I think they're different.
Yeah, I agree.
Jenny, how long did you suffer from schizophrenia as a matter of interest?
Me, I was probably in the thick of it for about 6 to 8 months.
Really?
I had about a 3 or 4 month period when I was winding up to it, and my behaviour was very bizarre, and then eventually it just went off the charts, and I ended up in psych, and they drugged me up with you would know this, Jerry. Is it Largactil or Librium? I can't remember. Something beginning with L. But it absolutely paralysed me. I think it was Librium, and it absolutely paralysed me for several weeks. It was terrifying, absolutely terrifying, because you've still got all this stuff going on. You've still got all of this mental, what you believe is mental activity. You've still got these things attacking you, but you can't do anything. You can't run anywhere. You can't move. So that is really terrifying. And then over the period of time, I have to confess, they put me on Stelazine, and I think then they changed it to haloperidol and something else. I can't remember now. But eventually they managed to shut my brain down. So eventually my brain got shut down. And that gave my body a chance to relax because, my body was hyper. I was like about 8 stone. I'm 11 stone now. I was 8 stone. I was like 3 stone lighter than I am. And I'm not fat now. So my body was absolutely skinny as a rake and I was really hyper. So I think the haloperidol calmed that down. And then eventually when I was released from hospital, within another 2 months, I was so sick of those drugs. I just thought, I'm not taking them anymore. So I stopped taking them. And literally that was the moment when I started to regain my equilibrium. I didn't go back to hospital once. I didn't go back to the day centre, even though all the doctor's notes were saying, oh, you mustn't come off your drugs. You'll regress. I thought, I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it. It makes me so ill.
There's a number of research studies now that show that it makes things worse. It doesn't make things better. It makes things worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
People do better without them.
And there's a guy called Daniel Mackler who spent a lot of time researching and he did some videos. He was a filmmaker and he did some videos of how they treat schizophrenia in Scandinavia, parts of Scandinavia. This must be 20, 30 years old, so it might have changed since then. But they did a whole load of some consultative treatment. Drugs was absolutely last resort, and the consultative treatment worked fabulously. They got, the people in the family consulting and talking and sharing and understanding and trying to collaborate and work together with families with the affected person. And it was just a huge, huge network of support. Without a single drug in place. So he did amazing stuff, Daniel.
Well, that's important because what the voices tell the schizophrenic patient is get away from your family. Isolate yourself, lock yourself in your room. They're full of crap. Stay away from them. The voices don't want any interference by any family members, any boyfriend, girlfriend. They try to break up relationships. They don't want humans to have any relationship. They want the schizophrenic patient to be locked in a room listening to them 24 hours a day. That's what they're shooting for.
That sounds a bit like propaganda over the last 3 years, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, you look what they did to us. 6 feet apart. Don't talk to anybody. Stay at home.
Look at that bloke. What is it? The chief medical officer. He came on the television. Well, I don't watch television, but it was actually on the internet. Actually,
Chris Whitty.
That's right. Didn't blink once. That's not human. He just sat there like that, and he didn't blink. Do you remember that?
Wow,
Jenny
weird.
and Robert. He just didn't blink. Yeah, and it was creepy. But actually, I 100% agree with the next comment in chat. 100% agree. Doctors are idiots. Yes, I 100% agree with you there.
What?
Yes. Yes.
Curiously, Chris and the panel, Chris Whitty went to the same public school. Well, we call them public schools in this country, Jerry, private schools. It'd be like Choate or something like that the Kennedys went to. But he went to Malvern College, Jenny, which is the same school that C.S. Lewis and Aleister Crowley went to.
Interesting.
Isn't that weird?
Wow.
Yeah. Very interesting. I just thought throw me 10 cents worth in there.
Thanks, Robert. That explains a lot, because we've got Aunt Sally here that says, how and why do these entities pick the people they inhabit? That's a very interesting question.
Well, to some degree, the people let them in. You know, they give them at some level permission to be there. You know, not, and there are times where that might not be their fault. Now, especially, you know, severely sexually abused, mentally abused, physically abused people. Their vibrational level gets so low that it matches that of the entities, and they just move right in. You know, amphetamine is another one that just lets them, you know, come on in. It's just like inviting them in, you know, but at some level they're let in.
Yes. I think on this next question, it's got I would personally think this person's South Coast Rich said, without the drug companies and GPs expertise, I would be dead. My medication saved my life. Well, it has its purpose. I mean, if you run over by a bus, yes, they can fix you up and they would need to give you drugs and things. But I think we're talking about mental illness here. And although I'm against anything artificial in your system, you know.
Well, those drugs do have a place. I mean, those psychiatric drugs, because there was a lot of patients I wouldn't even be able to reach if it wasn't for those drugs. They would be too far out. You know, they'd be too gone. But with those drugs, I can reach them. I can talk to them. You know, and if I can talk to them, we can get them healed up some. You know, but without those drugs, they would be too far out. I mean, have you run into that, Jenny, where they can't even concentrate? You really can't work with them because they're just too far out there.
Yeah, to be fair, I don't have many clients that come through with schizophrenia because it's not my speciality. Although it's been my history in the distant past, it's not what I specialize in. But there have been a few people that have come through with schizophrenia I cannot reach. And what made a lot of sense to me was reading the book by Malady Some called Of Water and the Spirit.
Right. I love that book.
It's a beautiful book, and he talks about his very late initiation into the tribe that he was in Burkina Faso, and the fact that they went out into the bush, you know, with their shaman masters and leaders, and they were told, we're going to give you a psychedelic, and you'll go into a different realm, and you have to watch that you stay on track, that you don't get seduced by that entity, ignore that entity, don't do that, don't do this. Your job is to get through that maze and come back. Now, in my opinion, some of these schizophrenics are lost on the other side. They're lost in that maze, in the alternative reality that the psychedelics take them into. They've been captured by entities that live on the other side. and they're very hard to bring back. That's my opinion.
Yes.
I don't know how that sits with you, Jerry.
Yeah, well, they are captured. You know, it's like I'd ask them. I said, well, if you know these things are lying to you, and you know you can't trust them, why do you listen to them? And their response was, because they're so damn believable.
Mm.
You know, they sound real, very real.
Mm.
You know, and they actually knock out the person's reason. That's one of the patterns that they run. I mean,
is it the need for familiarity there as well, Jerry? That they're better the devil you know rather than the devil you don't. Well, literally the devil you know than the devil you don't. Is it our that human need for the familial? Is that what that could be?
I'm not quite sure what you're asking. I mean, these voices,
no,
they're not nice things. I can't imagine anybody wanting them.
No. But what I'm trying to say is that these people cling and sort of cleave to these, even though they're malevolent spirits and they're absolutely evil and repugnant. But they seem to know these and be familiar with them and seem to cling to them. And that's what I was getting at.
I see what you're asking. Yeah, I've run into a handful like that. One that we actually got rid of the voices. I mean, it took 6 months. We got rid of them. And I remember
that's impressive.
Well, that's happened several times. I mean, it's not an everyday occurrence, but it's happened a number of times. But we got rid of them, and I remember when they left, they screamed, and he just sat there like a zombie. And his words that came out of his mouth, he said, "The silence is deafening." Okay?
Wow.
So they were gone, and then they transferred me to another unit. But I came back to visit him to see how he was doing.
Yeah.
And he said, "I was so lonely. I didn't have any friends. I didn't know how to interact with people. I asked for them to come back." And here he was working a job, and the voices were back.
Stockholm syndrome, basically.
Yep.
Yeah, that's amazing. Jenny, it puts me in mind of something that Dom said to you when you were on the Sheep Farm podcast about him getting rid of parasites and them screaming when they came out of his body. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think I do. This is Dom as opposed to Chris, isn't it? Because that's what
Dom said that. Yeah, because Dom's into the health sort of side of things. But that just reminds me of something. Is there a parallel there? Are these entities we're talking about, as well as manifesting themselves as parasites in your body, Jerry? Do you think that's the case?
Well, Andrew Weil, Dr. Andrew Weil, he's been banned from YouTube also.
Right.
He
must be good.
He believes that there is a one-to-one correspondence between bodily parasites and these mental parasites.
Wow, that is interesting.
So he's kind of convinced of it, and he had a parasite. Yeah, he had kind of like a parasite protocol for how to get rid of the physical parasites. But since I'm not a medical doctor, I haven't delved into that part of things. But I know that the voices are energetic parasites. They are sucking our energy. I mean, and it's even thought by thought. I remember, last year I was here in Arizona. We don't have lawns because there's not enough water.
It's too hot.
For the most part, it's too hot. We go out and we cut the cactus with a machete, kind of keep it down. And, I was out in the backyard cutting the cactus down to kind of keep it under control. And I have this beautiful white husky dog that she doesn't belong in the desert. And she runs by. She wasn't doing anything to me. She wasn't bothering me. She runs by. And I heard this voice come into my head, "Cut her head off." And I'm like,
Jesus.
It shocked me. I mean, it was like, where did that come from? It wasn't me, but it upset me, and I knew they were feeding off me when they did that. I mean, it created enough of an emotional disturbance that I could even have such a thought that it provided food for them. And that happens to all of us. It's these random thoughts that pop into your head to tell you to do something that's absolutely disgusting that you would never do in your entire life, but it's telling you to do it. That's them.
Do you find that some people have, like, for instance, I call them, they're called psychic vampires. And
that's what they are.
Married into my family, it would take you 3 days to get over it. You felt physically and mentally exhausted after being in their presence.
Yeah, they drain you.
They absolutely drained it. And what it was, my brother-in-law basically, and he separated my sister from the rest of the family, got her away from the rest of the family, and made her believe that everybody was against all kinds of terrible things like that. I won't go into it, but this exhaustion, you'd feel absolutely worn out after being in their presence. And I've actually worked with people like that. They walk into the room and the temperature psychologically drops. There's something draining about them. I found this heck of a lot.
I remember when I started working with schizophrenics in the prison, I found that if I worked with more than 2 of them a day, I came back and I was absolutely drained. I didn't have any energy at all. Even now in my private practice, I only work with 2 a day. That's all I can take. It's a whole lot easier working with people who aren't schizophrenic. A whole lot easier. But yeah, they do drain you. There is an energy drain.
I think there's also something odd, and people are going to laugh at me now. I mean, I was on a train once, and I don't know if they have this in the States, but you have first class carriages, then you have sort of ordinary class. I don't know, do you have that in the States on the trains? You can go sort of posh and non-posh, and commuters go in the ordinary carriages, and then you have sort of first class, and MPs can go first class. And I was sitting, and I used to get onto a carriage which was half first class, half ordinary class, because people thought the whole carriage was first class. And you generally got a seat, you see. So I got on this carriage, and this was just before the rush hour started, and I left work a little early on this Friday afternoon, and an MP got on and recognised somebody at the end of the carriage, and instead of going to the end of the carriage and talking to him, he broadcasts to the rest of the carriage, how marvellous he was. And there was something about this fella's psyche that I found depressing, and I've found this with a lot of these MP. There's something unsettling about them. I don't know whether you found this amongst. I mean, I'm sure there must be some.
Well, there's psychopaths. A lot of them are psychopaths. I know the. You look at the ones that we have over here, and I mean, they're just what they do is unconscionable. I mean, it's just they're just paid off, they're bought off. They could care less about the country or the people. It's all what they can get for themselves.
Well, I don't vote, and we even had when Trump was running, we even had the regalia and all everything being sold in this country. And people worship Trump as if he was a sort of messiah or something. And to me, I don't know, but to me, he's another cheek of the same backside. Just
he's the only one that has stood up against the deep state and survived. Everybody else was killed or driven off. I mean, Kennedy attempted to, and as soon as he threatened the CIA. He was gone the next day almost. Trump has threatened the CIA a number of times already. He's threatened the FBI. He's threatened to take them all on. Now,
how does he survive though?
I have no idea. And I heard there's like 51 attempts on him so far.
Really?
Now they're trying to arrest him for whatever they can arrest him for. Like January 19th or something. They're saying he incited that riot when they have recordings of him saying, "No, go home peacefully." I mean, they're doing everything they can to remove him from the scene. No bars hold.
Do you think Biden is real though? Because I saw a film of scratching the back of his neck,
and you can see his mask peel up.
Yeah, I thought that was sort of.
I think he's an actor, And if you look at the real Biden, and look at this actor that they installed in there, you can see there's a big difference between them. They don't look alike.
I know.
Not at all.
Yeah, this guy was installed by the deep state, and it was an insurrection. They took over the government, and they're doing a good job of destroying this country right now. If Trump doesn't get in, we're done. I mean, we're done, and the rest of the world will go down with us.
Yes. Well, when you look you look at films of say 60, 70 years ago, the United States, and you look at it now.
It's a mess. It's an absolute mess
right
now.
The same with Great Britain. It's a complete mess as well. But very quickly, we got in the chat here. We've got here. This is what I'm talking about barefoot shoes. It says rubber should stop energy on your feet. Yes, I realise that, but I don't particularly want to walk around the streets in bare feet, knowing what doggies have done on the streets and the pavements and things like that. So that's the reason why I wear shoes when I go down the road. You know?
Yeah, out here in Tucson, you walk down the street without shoes out here, your feet will be roasted like hamburger.
Of course, yeah, Jesus. Chris, there's a really good question for both Jenny and Jerry right at the end of the chat. It's from Aunt Sally. Is the panel aware of any of these schizophrenics that have been treated by a priest/exorcist?
That's a brilliant one. Thanks.
I have been, and the voices disappear for a while. But if these people don't get on a positive spiritual path and stay there, the voices eventually come back. You know, so what we're talking about is energy and vibration. You know, these entities operate at a very low level of vibration. You know, they want to drag the people down to that level. You know, if you don't get on some kind of positive spiritual path and keep moving, you stall out, they'll get you again.
This is why I think, you know, we owe it to ourselves to really not get religion, but to really dig deep into our true identity, who we are. And I don't know about you guys, but certainly since the nonsense, as the boys would call it, you know, it's caused me to dig deeper than I've ever dug before. Yes. And I now perceive myself as an energy being. I mean, I can feel my physical body, but I feel like I'm in a dream world. Like this isn't really real. This is just whatever I create it to be. And I, you know, and I don't know if you guys know Archaics, Jason Brashears, but he says there are two timelines. There's the Matrix, there's the big simulation that we're all living in, this kind of creation by the dark forces, whatever. And then there's your own reality, which is a kind of a bubble within that matrix, within that simulation. And I genuinely believe the more we can dig deep and really find out who we are, the more we find our true identity as spiritual beings, the more immune we are to all of this.
Right. And that's what the MACE thing does. It removes all these viruses, like these computer viruses that are put in our minds that are controlling our behavior. And it knocks them out one by one, and you emerge as who you really are, the spiritual being that you actually are. You know, so you're right on, Jenny. We are spiritual beings. We're you know, we have no limits. I mean, there's no computer that can retain as much information as we do. Yeah. I mean, you know, we're spiritual beings. That's all there is to it. And here they're treating us like machines, like machines made of meat. I mean, they're so far off base. It's incredible.
I 100% agree with you there. I mean, I rate myself as, I'm not religious, but I like to believe, and it's for other people to judge, that I'm spiritual. I believe in spirituality. And there's an energy, but I don't know what that energy is. So I don't hide the fact I don't know what it is, but I respect it. And it's like anything. You respect what you don't know, and I really don't know. I don't think anybody really fully knows.
Well, you just look at what's around you. I mean, look at how everything is ordered, how everything runs. The trees are doing what they're supposed to be doing. The grass is doing. I mean, it's just such an incredible machine. You know,
it is.
Look at the planet Earth. I mean, it's at the perfect distance from the sun to survive, and you know, not too far out, not too close. I mean, look at the parameters that we have, you know, to survive in. I mean, everything is, there's order. You can look around and you can see order. Who created that order? Something created that order.
Also, with evolution, I don't believe in evolution.
No, well, you look.
But that would mean that my car, in millions of years' time, would suddenly evolve into a car.
Well, you can say that, but they have these gaps in evolution, and then they've traced back the genetic field to a place where all of a sudden the genes just suddenly changed. I mean, just suddenly. It wasn't evolution. It was just happened, boom, like that. There was one gene that then right on, a few years later, another time gene. So there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense with regard to evolution.
Well, we've come up to time, and I can honestly say this has been an absolutely incredible show tonight. Thanks to all the guests. Thank you very much, Jerry, Jenny, and Robert. Absolutely fantastic. And everybody in chat has been fantastic as well. Please accept my apology. I couldn't get all your questions in on chat. I couldn't read them all out. I've done the best I can. But thank you very much. I don't know if you would like something to end off on, anybody? Jerry, Jenny, Robert, is there anything you'd like to say?
If I may, there's a quote from Sean Hamer. Thanks for this, Sean. This will be right up your street, Jenny, I think. Buddha said that the primary distortion that holds us in bondage is the false belief in an illusory, non-existent self.
I would agree in principle, and that rolls out in almost everything we believe we're capable of. If we think we can't do something, it's because we have limiting beliefs about who we really are.
Right.
And I think, and I think, pushing those aside, really challenging them and saying, who am I really? What could I achieve if I really wanted to? Is where you start to grow spiritually. And energetically, you just start to expand in a way that you can't if you believe in your limitations. So
right, yeah, we're energetic beings. I mean, there is no limit to what we can do.
And also, what is the name of your cat, Jenny? Because we got some. Is it he or she?
This is Luna. She hasn't seen me for 4 days because I've just come back from a blues festival. And my neighbour's been looking after her, and she's kind of like, Mummy, Mum, give me a stroke. And I'm hungry. So her name's Luna because she's a bit of a lunatic, she's a bit of a loony.
Well, if we could all stay on now, we'll sort of, shall we say, we'll have to close now. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming on. And remember, I've got a mystery guest next week. I wonder who that could be. It could be. I wonder who it could be. You'll have to tune in and find out when you're 8 o'clock, same time, same place. And I say this every week. I'm not sure it's shall we say fitting of this one, but because with mental illness you shouldn't really laugh at it. But I always say, with all these problems in the world, I've always said that these people in power, if you laugh at them, what can they do? Just laugh at them. That's a very powerful weapon that we've got. Can you imagine? They're standing up these statesmen talking away, and everybody's going, what can they do? Very little. Thank you very much, everybody. And as I say, whatever happens, have a laugh, and we'll see you next week. And good night.